Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely reframe your worldview on exactly why you feel chronically overwhelmed, exhausted, and endlessly distracted. We are stepping way back from the usual self-help cliches, and we're looking right under the hood at the actual neuroscience driving your daily life. If you're like most of us, you probably blame yourself for a lot of these struggles. Like you sit down to work and boom, suddenly you're 3 hours deep into some random internet rabbit hole. Or you hit 2 p.m. and you just feel completely drained. And what do? You attribute that lack of focus to a personal failure. You tell yourself you just lack willpower or discipline. You play that quiet internal soundtrack of, seriously, what is wrong with me? Well, let's dive right into this, because this is the absolute paradigm shift you need. Listen carefully. You are not lazy. Your struggles, they're not moral flaws. They are physiological responses to overloaded, poorly calibrated biological hardware. You aren't missing discipline. What you're actually missing is the chemical configuration that makes discipline automatic.
So today we're going to run a full system diagnostics checklist to give you the actual neuroscience mechanics to take back control of your mind. We'll be looking at the myth of laziness, the chemistry of focus, the emptiness of overload, decoding the guilt signal, understanding how sleep is data processing, and finally, calibrating your systems.
All right, let's jump straight into section 1, the myth of laziness. Now, I want you to pay really close attention to this number, 7. If you get 7 hours of sleep or less, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles focus, decision-making, and self-control, it basically starts shutting down. In fact, your brain functions at a level comparable to being legally drunk. But here's the really dangerous part. You don't actually feel impaired. You feel totally normal. So you delay starting your tasks, you find yourself rereading the exact same sentence 3 times, and you mistake all of this for procrastination. But it's not. It is cognitive fatigue. Your brain is quite literally running on backup power. Moving right along to section 2, the chemistry of focus. So, now that we know you're dealing with cognitive fatigue and not laziness, how does focus actually work? Well, your brain uses 2 main chemicals to drive attention. First up, dopamine. Think of this as your ignition switch. It's what gets you started. If your dopamine is low, every single task just looks like a massive gray loading screen. Then you have acetylcholine. This is your spotlight. It decides how narrow or wide your attention beam is. When it's tight, you lock in. When it's scattered, you behave exactly like a web browser with 20 tabs open and none of them are loading correctly. True deep focus only happens when your dopamine is steady and your acetylcholine is incredibly narrow. The coolest part? You can actually force these chemicals into balance intentionally. You can run what we call this illegal focus protocol. And no, you don't need to listen to some intense motivational speech. It's just pure mechanical design. First, you do a cognitive reset. Take 30 slow breaths to wipe out the internal static and get that prefrontal cortex back online. Next, dopamine ignition. Just knock out one tiny microtask to literally turn the mental key. Then the attention tunnel. Commit to 20 minutes with absolutely zero task switching to stop your acetylcholine from leaking everywhere. And finally, lock in. Add friction. Put your phone in another room, close those unused tabs. Focus isn't magic, guys. It's architecture. Okay, let's look at section 3, the emptiness of overload. Your poor brain is constantly dealing with a totally unfair competition, and it's draining the joy right out of your life. On one hand, you've got real life. It's slow, it has awkward pauses, and it takes genuine, sustained effort to maintain a conversation or build a new skill. On the flip side, you've got fake stimulation. It is algorithmically optimized, lightning fast, and it hands you effortless, instant rewards with absolutely zero dead air. And when your brain gets used to those effortless rewards, it physically rewires itself. It completely loses interest in anything that requires actual, real-world work. So here is the absolute crucial takeaway. When you finally put your phone down and you suddenly get all twitchy, restless, or anxious, you are not bored. Your brain is literally throwing a dopamine withdrawal tantrum. It is chemical withdrawal, plain and simple. Once you can actually observe that discomfort instead of just fighting it, and you realize you're just reacting to a conditioned urge, that's when you get the power of choice back. That brings us to section 4, decoding the guilt signal. A lot of us think that feeling guilty all the time just proves we're good, moral people, right? Well, actually, guilt is just a neural signal from your amygdala trying to protect your social belonging, but you've got to evaluate it. Productive guilt happens when you cause identifiable, concrete harm to someone else. The resolution there is simple. You acknowledge it, you apologize, and you repair the damage. Toxic guilt, on the other hand, happens when you violate imagined expectations, like choosing to rest instead of working or saying no to a party. Your nervous system reacts as if you've endangered your social safety, leaving you trapped in this toxic loop with no endpoint, entirely tied to perfectionism. But hey, you can totally interrupt this toxic loop with a super powerful cognitive reframe. Just stop using the word should. Saying, I should have worked more, implies you broke some objective, universal rule. Swap it out for the word chose. Say, I chose to rest, or I chose to protect my time. Every behavior involves a trade-off. When you frame your decisions as actual choices, you instantly restore regulatory control right back to your prefrontal cortex and shut down that false threat response. All right, on to Section 5, sleep is data processing. We really need to stop thinking of sleep as just getting rest. It is so much more than that. Sleep is literally a physiological data flush. It's when your brain clears out metabolic waste and consolidates all your memories. And you can actually control this process by calibrating 4 biological levers. First, your wake time, not your bedtime, your wake time. That is the anchor that sets your entire circadian rhythm. Second is light. Morning light wakes you up, while nighttime screens totally delay your melatonin. Third, input timing. You absolutely have to stop consuming new information before bed so your brain can switch from acquisition mode to storage mode. And fourth, sleep pressure. Your bed has to strictly be a sleep-only environment, not a place to doom scroll or stress over tomorrow's problems. And finally, Section 6, calibrating your systems. Let's look at how to pull all these tools together when you need to perform under pressure, like cramming for a big exam. By aligning your study intervals directly with your sleep and focus mechanics, you use spaced repetition to master material incredibly fast. Let's say at hour 0, you do your initial study using multi-sensory engagement, hearing, seeing, and writing all at once to build really strong neural connections. 2 hours later, you do your first review using active recall, forcing your brain to retrieve the info under timed pressure. Then, here's the absolute game changer. 12 hours later, about 20 minutes before bed, you review the hardest concepts. Because you know sleep is data processing, you are deliberately letting your subconscious do the heavy lifting of locking in that memory overnight. Finally, 24 hours later, you do a quick refresher brain dump the next morning. It is a brilliant, perfect synthesis of your biological systems. Wow. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground today. We mapped out the neurochemistry of focus, the absolute trap of algorithmic overstimulation, the false alarms of toxic guilt, and the intense data processing power of sleep. Now I want you to take a really hard look at these systems we've just mapped out. Think about the person who is constantly exhausted, endlessly scrolling, and beating themselves up for being lazy. Ask yourself, is that overwhelmed person really someone else, or is it you? Are you finally ready to stop playing the victim to your own uncalibrated biology? Please, whatever you do, do not let this be just another explainer you passively consume just to get a quick hit of artificial dopamine, only to completely forget it tomorrow. The absolute biggest tragedy of modern overload isn't missing out on external opportunities, it's losing yourself. So build the setup, turn off the notifications, step right into the discomfort of withdrawal and choose to take back your mind today. Because if you can't think, feel, or create, what is left but mere existence? Choose to feel again.